we have an interesting crowd here today because I'm seeing people from different parts of the organization. Is it on? Okay. And so it's kind of confusing, but it's good to see you. So it's like when I go to different we go to a Dallas thing and there are people from all different cities. I'm like, oh man, now I'm really confused. I had you when I went to your city, but now I don't know who you are or where I'm from, but where you're from. Okay, so I want to welcome Jen Mann, the new Chief Human Resource Officer. Jen's right here. Jen, why don't you stand up so folks can see you? So welcome her, would you? So Jen is on the executive leadership team, and I've lost track already how long you've been here, but it can't be more than a couple of months. But she is quickly moving and picking up and also adding value to our work. So glad to have you, Jen. Glad to have you here today. Okay, so we're in the middle of Hispanic, and there are those of us that are joining us online. I don't know how many, but for those of you that are online, I'll try to look over there and acknowledge that you're with us. So this is Hispanic Heritage Month that started, I think, the middle of September and goes through the middle of October. And I think yesterday or one day this week was Christopher Columbus Day. And I think the same day or the day before or after was Indigenous Peoples Day. So you got to celebrate both, right? And so there's a whole history I won't get into, but we can talk about that maybe at lunch. And I think I'm supposed to go for about 30 minutes. Sean, is that right? Whoever. So yeah, good. Okay, thumbs up. All right, so we'll try to do that in 30 minutes. So, you know, this, besides being Hispanic, I think I learned some things about the culture through studies in seminary and then also at Andrews in this area of cultural anthropology, cross-cultural studies. And I did my first doctorate about Hispanic people in El Paso, which, by the way, April 30th, 1598 was the first Thanksgiving that was celebrated in the continental US 25 years before Plymouth Rock. That's a fact, which you may not have heard before, but that's kind of just a little factoid there. That's kind of interesting. But I studied El Paso as a city. I'll get into this a little bit more. And then I took some of those principles into the second doctoral studies and did that. So I don't know if I'm an expert, and certainly I'm going to say things today about Hispanic people that some of you are Hispanic will say, it's not like that. So these are generalizations. It doesn't apply to everybody, but hopefully I'll get, you know, we'll say más o menos, like more or less in the range that you will agree with me. And for some of you, you think you're going to be shocked at some of the things you'll hear today, because you'll think, I've already had some of you say, I didn't know it was, had no idea that was the case. So hopefully we'll do some learning. And I think the idea to have this type of conversation and discussion today is just to be able to understand cultures and how they're different. In fact, there's one slide that I actually have to give credit to my wife, who did this in her PhD work, that contrasts Euro-American culture and Hispanic culture. That's kind of the heart of everything I'm going to talk about today. She actually developed it, and I should give her credit for it. So I borrowed it with permission from her. So let's get started. I think that, yeah, okay, good. All right, so in 1990, about 1/4 of all people living in Texas were Hispanic. And then the year 2000, it became 1/3. And then this past year, 40%. So I think it was in 22 or 23 that Hispanic people became a majority in Texas. Even though it's 40%, it's the largest of any group in Texas today. So, you know, the trend is going that direction. You can see the trend, right? And by, I think it was supposed to be by 2040 or 2030 that Hispanics were supposed to be the majority in Texas. So we're like 7 years ahead. And so all the projections will come more accelerated our way. So, you know, we're going to be moving more and more to a Hispanic predominant culture in the foreseeable future, certainly by 2030, 40, and 50. It's going to be, you know, what I used to say years ago when I saw these trends, in the future, you'll either be bicultural and bilingual, or the other alternative is you be by yourself. So, you know, I think it's better to learn a little Spanish if you can, and even more so the culture, because you can say the right words in Spanish, but you can break some of the cultural rules while you're doing it intending to be, engaging, but you kind of just shut yourself down because you broke some rules that you didn't know about. So I'm going to try to hit some of those today. So those are the demographic trends headed to the future. There was a book that was written by Stephen Kleinberg, Rice University. Boy, I should have written this down, but he wrote, the title of the book is Houston at the edge of a transitioning country. So that's not the exact title, but I think you can look it up. But it shows how Houston is already even more diverse than Dallas. And when you compare Houston to New York, Chicago, Phoenix, Los Angeles, all the major cities across major metro areas across the nation, that the proportion of Hispanics and Anglo and African American Asians pretty much mirror Houston. Houston's actually leading the nation in terms of diversity. So if you're uncomfortable with diversity, then there are other countries you might want to consider, because we're going to be more and more diverse as we go, and Houston is leading the way. And it's Stephen Kleinberg called it an epic demographic transformation. So epic, like bigger than mega, like epic demographic transformation. Like no generation has seen what's happening in Texas today other than our own. We're the ones living in it. We're seeing the change happen. Certainly your children and grandchildren will see a different future than you experienced even now. Okay, so 2003 became the largest minority in the US, and of course, Dallas has more Hispanics than San Antonio, San Antonio is 60% Hispanic. So, but we have in raw numbers more Hispanic people living in Dallas than in San Antonio. It was kind of a bit of a shocker there. So again, just to give you a little bit of background of why we should even be talking about this today, because it's where we're headed in the future. Okay, so what I did is took from Jess Miranda, Dr. Jess Miranda, who's passed away now with the Lord at Vanguard University, shared with me this idea of the Samaritan factor. So he looked at in the Bible and explored the Samaritans and how they were regarded by the Jewish people. And then if you go to John chapter 4, you have the conversation that the woman at the well had with Jesus. Now, if you read that carefully, we're not going to read the scripture today, but if you recall it, the scripture or John, the gospel writer, said Jesus had to go through Samaria. Now, if you know your geography right, no self-respecting Jew would go through Samaria. That's the other side of the tracks. You don't go there. So if you're in southern part of Israel and you want to get to Nazareth, you cross over the Jordan River and you go up the right side of the river, going around Samaria, because you don't go through there. You don't put your feet on that dirt. That's just like, that's beneath you. So you go across the Jordan, up the right side, and when you get to Nazareth, you cross back over. That's the route Jewish people were to take. You would never go the easy way straight, because Jews don't have anything to do with Samaritans. But so John said that Jesus had to go through Samaria. He was on mission. He was on purpose. And there at the well of Sychar, he met the woman at the well who was there drawing water. And he starts to have the conversation. And I think it's the one where he says, where's your husband? And, so then in the conversation, Jesus says, well, actually, you've had several husbands, and, you're living with another man right now. So she perceived him then as a supernatural person, a prophet. Now, what's interesting is if you walk through that conversation, the woman at the well, which we don't have her name, drives the agenda of the topics. She drives the topics, right? First topic is about culture. She says, wait a minute, aren't you in the wrong neighborhood? Like you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. Like, what are you doing here? Are you lost, or did you take a wrong turn? Or you're not supposed to be in our neighborhood. So she brings up the issue of the difference in culture. Then Jesus says, I'm going to give you water to drink. So she's there to draw water, and she has the tools to pull the water up. And Jesus, who has nothing in his hand, says, I'm going to give you water. And if you knew the water I'm going to give you, then you would know that you would never thirst again. And she's like, what? Like, are you going to give us water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who built this well? Like, who are you to offer us water? This is our well. This is Jacob's well. He's our father. He's the one that gave us this well. So now she's making a historical reference, right? She's referring back to history. So first it was about culture, and then it's about history. The third conversation as she goes through it is that she says, okay, let me ask you a question, Rabbi. You Jews say Jerusalem is the right place to worship, but we know that the rightful place is Mount Gerizim. So which is it, Mount Gerizim or is it Jerusalem? It's a religious question. It's a theological question. And Jesus answered and said, it's not about place. It's about those, the Father seeks worshipers who worship with two characteristics, in spirit and in truth. Those are the qualifiers that God wants for worshipers, not physical location. But nevertheless, she's dealing with a religious question. So you have the Samaritan paradigm, that the template, if you will, to have that cross-cultural engagement is culture, history, and religion. And so Ecclesiastes 4:12 says a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So if you take 3 strands of a cord and you tie them together, that's a pretty sturdy strand. It's not going to fall apart. It's not going to be broken easily. So I submit that these are the 3 strands that you want to consider if you want to dive into Hispanic culture. In fact, any culture that you want to learn about around the world is going to have cultural aspects, historical aspects, and religious aspects built into the worldview. So you'll get that. It's just a handy paradigm for us to use. So having said that, let's jump into the culture a little bit. So there are a lot of characteristics of Hispanic culture. For those of you online, hopefully you can see the screen, but I just picked out a few that I'm going to try to touch on just to give you a sampling, right? So it's not exhaustive, it's not comprehensive, it's not everything you can know about Hispanic culture. They're just some of the highlights, right, that stand out. So first, you have a collective worldview, and that means that Hispanic people see the world as a group, right? So if you were to ask me, well, who are you? I would say, well, I'm part of the Garcias and I'm part of the Reyeses, and also the Guerreros and the Quijanos and, the Stevensons from Scotland. So, I mean, that's my group, right? So I don't have an identity outside the group. I would never identify myself in a Hispanic setting as just an individual person with no connection to a group. You only have identity if you're in a group. So that's kind of a collective worldview. So the way you see the world is by groups, right? Not individuals. So it's a little bit different in American culture. It's relationally focused, right? So it's all about relationships. It's the quality of relationships that you have. It's like you've heard it said before, it's who you know. It's really literally the people that you know. That's how your whole life revolves around those relationships. And then, of course, dignity and respect. Those are our values at Buckner. But in Hispanic culture, every human being, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, origin, regardless of where you come from on the planet, if you're a human being made in the image of God, you have a certain allocation of dignity that you get just by walking in the room. You have it. Just by showing up, you've got dignity, right? And everybody knows we got to treat each other with dignity. And of course, respect. Respect is a very, very, very high respect for the individual, who they are, their personhood, their dignity, just respect for the person. And then, of course, I'm going to come back to the concept of time in a minute, but passion, if anything is worth doing, is you got to do it with passion, right? If you're going to sing, you sing your heart out, right? If you're going to preach, you better perspire, And so you just do it with passion. Otherwise, forget it. Never mind. Go back to bed, right? And then family-centered is that the center of gravity for Hispanic culture is the nuclear family. But it's not defined just by nuclear family, because I remember one time I was at a retreat center and I met this executive and we're talking. And so he asked me a question. He says, well, do you have any family? And I said, well, sure. I have an older brother and I have a younger brother. My older brother is, he married a lady from Mexico and they have 3 children. And my younger brother, and he says, no, I'm talking about your wife and kids. I said, well, yeah, I've got that too. And so I started to talk about my younger brother, and he changed the subject. I'm like, I haven't told you about my family yet, because I have cousins. I have 72 cousins. You know, my mom had 11 brothers and sisters. My dad had 9. Like, how much time do you have? You want to know about my family? But that's my family, not my family. My family is not just Belinda and our 3 sons, adult sons. It's my brothers, and it's their wives and their kids, my primos, and you know, on and on and on and on, right? You can go as far as you want to. And I even met some new family this past weekend in Mexico City that I didn't know were my cousins. So but it's family, it's all about family. It's family centered, right? And then the concept of time, Sherwood Longenfelder and Marvin K. Mayers, 2 anthropologists, did a study in their book, Ministering Cross-Culturally. And so the title, I think the subtitle is An Incarnational Model for Relationships. And so what they did is they measured time. I should have had it up here, but they looked at North American time, Latin American time, and Yapese time. And I won't get this exactly right, but I think, you know, the question was, when you come to a meeting like today, right? So when are you late, or when are you on time? North Americans say if you get there within the first 5 minutes of the starting time, 5 minutes after, everybody's good. Colleen, no problem, you're on time. Everything's good. In Hispanic culture, if you get there from the start time by the 30 minutes after, you're good. You're on time. No problem. You made it. In Yapese culture, if you get there, I think, an hour after the start time, it's okay. You made it on time. You could come across the island and catch a wind, and, you know, it could detain you a little bit. So an hour is good. Well, then when does it move to excuse time, excuse lateness to tension? Now we're going to have tension. Well, in North American culture, it's 15 after. You start to have, like, you know, tension. People get like a little irritated, right? In Hispanic culture, I think it's 45 minutes to an hour. You start to have a little bit of tension. In Yapese culture, it's 2 hours. You start to have a little bit of tension. Well, when does it move from tension to hostility, where you would say, Vesta, you're late in front of everybody? I can call you out, right? Which you weren't late, but I'm just saying an example. So, well, in North American culture, it's 30 minutes after you get called out, because now it's hostility. In Hispanic culture, I think it's an hour and a half, you start to have hostility. And Yapese culture, it's 3 hours. Now we're going to have hostility. So, you know, I used to pastor churches that had both Anglos and Hispanics in the church. So we'd have a worship time, everybody would come, we'd start singing, get into the worship. And at 25 after, Hispanic family comes in with kids, and they're huffing and puffing, and they're thinking, whew, that was close, man, we made it. And the other people are like, you know, somewhere between tension and hostility, right? So we had to explain that time is relative. So they do that study, and they begin to tell you, you know, depending on where you are, how do you adjust the time? So, you know, we spent 7 years on the border in El Paso, where our 3 sons were born, and man, I came from Dallas to El Paso, and so this guy comes, we were in a new house, and he says, there's a part from the plumbing that's missing. I need to bring a little elbow and fix it, and I'm going to get the part, I'll be back. I said, great. No problem. We're moving in, you know, we're busy. So just come, we're here all day. So he leaves. 6 weeks later, there was a knock on the door, and he says, I'm back. And I'm like, and you are? So, I mean, like, I forgot about it, you know, I'm glad we're not using that part of the house. So, but to him, he was coming back, just not like 10 minutes later, that same day, because time. And then I would be driving on the inside lane of a US interstate, inside lane, 40 miles an hour. I look at the plaques in front of me, it says Chihuahua, Mexico. I'm like, what country am I in? Where am I? And people just go slower, right? It's not fast. So when we came to Dallas, my wife would say, hey, what time's your meeting start? Okay, you're not on the border anymore. You need to get there like before it starts, you know. So I still struggle with that, for those of you that know, and many of you have asked forgiveness for me being late to things, but I'm still trying to get the border off of me, but it's still on me. So concept of time, right? So the idea is, in this book, is that if you're with someone that you have a relationship with, and there's a task, do Do you cut the relationship conversation off, or do you decide to be late and delay the task? Well, if you're Hispanic, you stay with the relationship till there's a good exit point. It doesn't matter what time it was. You just, the lateness is not as important as the personal relationship that you're with. So time is flexible. It's relative. Literally, it's about your relatives too. So, okay. So here's the freight. I'm delivering the freight on this one. This will be helpful. It has been to me that when you take Euro-American values, which again, if you're Euro-American, these are generalities. They're not specific to everybody. And Hispanic cultural differences, then you're going to see the contrast, right? And you can see the difference. So, we have the Declaration of Independence, right? And so we're independent. We're rugged individuals, because I'm American as well. So I'm familiar with pull your bootstraps up and just make it and get it done. We have pioneers. We have people that just overcome odds, and they don't need anybody. They just get it done by themselves. You're expected to kind of just get it done, right? Well, that's a value in American culture. In Hispanic culture, the value is not independence, it's interdependence. You still get things done, but you get it done with other people, right? You cooperate, because you're in a group, right? And you're in a relationship, so you cooperamos, you cooperate, right? There's a value in doing it together instead of by yourself. See the difference? So if you were if you were to invite me to eat at your house, I would say yes, and then I would ask you a question. Does anybody know what the question is? What am I supposed to bring? Right? And if you were American, you would say, oh, no, we've got it all covered. We got it. It's on us. So just bring your appetite, right? Just bring your appetite. Well, by telling me just bring my appetite, now I feel bad because I'm supposed to cooperate, but you're not letting me cooperate. So it's kind of a little bit of a struggle and a dilemma. So I probably will bring something anyway and just slide it into the kitchen. Hopefully you don't notice, but because I have to cooperate. So then competition versus cooperation, there it is right there. So there's competition. So there was two sets of children playing a game, and they would play it 4 times. The Anglo children played it 4 times, and the same kid won all 4 times because he or she was the smartest one or the most skilled one. And so then the Hispanic group, they said, you play 4 times, and they were both playing at the same time. And this other group, they took turns winning. So no, I won last time. We're going to let you have the advantage. So, and they just took turns because they're cooperating. It's a higher value than competing to win. It's not that they're bad, they're just different, right? You see the point? They're just different. Direct communication and indirect communication. Oh, Lord have mercy. This is a big one. So, okay, so here's how I'm going to just say it, all right? So listen carefully. In Hispanic culture, indirect is direct. Direct is offensive. Does that make sense? So if I say, Jen, I want you to do this now. Well, that's pretty direct. But if I were to say, Jen, it's a little hot in here, that's an indirect. What does that mean? Please go turn the air down. So my wife, when we were first married, she'd say, it's a little hot in here. And I'd say, feels okay to me. So it's fine. I'm not hot. You're hot. I'm not hot. What she was saying was, get your rear end up and go turn the air down. And it just went right over. One time when I was the president of Hispanic Seminary in San Antonio, you remember this, brother, because I think you were there. And so, they were strapped for resources, could barely pay the bills. And I told everyone, I don't want anybody spending money on anything, right? We don't have money. So I'm going to do my best to make salary, and everything else we're going to have to juggle, and I'm going to go raise money, and we're going to see what we can do. It was week to week, month to month. It was that tight for quite some time. So it's one of my first days, I walked into the main administration building, and the director of facilities, a facility person, was with me, and he was giving me a tour. So he opens the door, I walked in, and I could see the walls look kind of dingy, like they could use a painting, like they look bad. So I tell the guy, I said, man, these walls look bad. I mean, they could use a painting. We need to get that on our list. So the day goes on, he shows me all the other buildings. The next day I walk in, guess what? There's masking tape and there's scraping the old paint off, and there's buckets of paint. I said, who authorized this? We don't have money for this. And he said, well, Dr. Reyes, you said that the walls need to be painted. I said, no, I was just making a comment. But I was making an indirect request. And the president was saying, paint the walls. That's what I was saying. So I had to kind of put masking tape on my mouth and stop talking and stop making comments. So direct in Euro-American is normal. We expect, what do we say? We say, hey, be upfront. Put your cards on the table. Let's speak direct. Well, that's what we expect because we want clarity, but not in Hispanic culture. Indirect is actually direct. Say it indirectly. Why? Because we want to be respectful of the person. We want them to save face. We want to make suggestions and gently say what needs to be done without being abusive and face-to-face and head-on, because that's actually mean and that's abusive. That's rough, right? Does that make sense? So you'll have to figure out when you want something done, Mr. Supervisor and Ms. Supervisor, and you have Hispanic staff, maybe if you said something indirectly, they'll get it. Actually, there's a book that I read. Oh, it's I think it's listed at the end here. Cross-Cultural Conflict by Dwayne Elmer, and he says there Matthew chapter 8. Oh, I've got the wrong. I don't have the verse, but verse 17, 18, where Jesus says, "If your brother offends you, go directly and tell him." Right, and if he listens to you, you've won your brother, and if he doesn't listen, you tell the congregation. If he doesn't listen to them, then tell the elders and kick him out. It's church discipline. And so he says that's not the only way to resolve conflict. It's the only Western way to resolve conflict. And there are 7 indirect ways to resolve conflict that are non-Western in their approach. And one of them is to tell a story. You want to resolve a problem in your department? Just tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a man who had a horse, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of tell the story about the situation, but just tell the story. And what is the Hispanic person doing? They're listening and they're asking, who am I in that story? And at the end of the story, they're thinking, oh, that's me. I got to stop doing that, and you've solved the problem, right? So there's also, dichos, which I don't know how to say that in English, sayings or wise sayings. You can say a dicho, haste makes waste, that's telling you, hey, you're going too fast, you need to slow down. So there's different ways. And then, of course, there's the one that's just being silent. Jesus solved problems by not saying a word. I don't know how I'm, I guess, more American. I don't know how that works, but apparently that's one of the ways. So anyway, direct and indirect, individual orientation, we already talked about that, group orientation, self-awareness versus saving face. So a high value in Hispanic culture is to save face. In other words, to save the public perception of who people believe you are. That's saving face, right? There's a certain perception that you want to get across. So Asian people have this very strong value, so do Hispanic people. So back to the illustration of Yoo-Hoo, if Yoo-Hoo says, hey, I'm having a gathering at my house at 6 o'clock, I want you to come, and I say, yeah, I'll be there, but I have no intention of going. But in order for her to save face, I say, yes, I'm coming, even though I know I'm not. I'm not lying, I'm saying, I'm saving your face, right? I'm saving face for you. I'm being courteous and kind, even though I don't show up. So those values can compete sometimes because, you want the truth, but sometimes what's more important than the truth is saving face. Let that sink in, right? It's not lying, it's a higher value than the truth, right? So you're going to choose one. And then control over destiny versus fatalistic. We're kind of, there's a song, que sera, sera, right? Whatever will be, will be. The future is not mine, you see, que sera, sera. So the idea is that, it's already in the stars. It was meant to be. Versus over here, we say, no, I've got control. I can change things. I can do things. So there's a difference. So you might encounter that. I think again, it's a generalization because I've also heard our people say, si se puede. You can do it, right? It's not in the stars. You can actually make a difference. You can do. And of course, the scripture that we all believe is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So that comes in conflict with the fatalistic view, right? And then nuclear family, I already told you about extended family and how that works. So, if you want to know, if you have time, you want to know about my family, I can tell you there's a lot of people to talk about. And then there's live to work and work to live. It's a different philosophy of work. And so my uncle, who is my mother's first cousin, but I call him uncle, even though he's not my uncle, because you have to use a title whenever you refer to someone who's older than you. I would never say first name to my uncle, or he's not my uncle, my mom's cousin. He's not my uncle, but we call him Theo because he's older. You always have to use a title. It's kind of rude to use the first name of someone your age or higher. You're supposed to use a title, right? And so anyway, my uncle, we went to Mexico City and he says, hey, next time you should come and spend a week in Mexico City. And then we're going to take you to Matehuala. We're going to have the mass that we have every year for my mother who passed away. And then we'll be there a few days. And then we'll go to Acapulco for a week. And, I've got a condo there and you could, they'll raise the flag when it's time to eat and go down the beach and just it's on me. I'm like, wow. I said, but Theo, we only get 2 weeks vacation over here. You're talking about 3. That's just, he says, the problem with you Americans is that you work to live and we live. No, you live to work and we work to live. So we take, we work for 3 months, take a month off, work for a few more months, take a month off. We work just so we can live, but you just live to work. You need to chill out and take a break. So again, it's a different perspective. So any questions here before we move on? I know our time is about up. Is it interesting? It's kind of like, whoa, I didn't know that. And maybe some of you that are Hispanic didn't know that about yourself, but it's true, right? It's like, oh yeah, that's right. That's why I was late. Oh, that's, so yeah, okay. But we're in North America and this is Dallas. It's not the border. So 12 o'clock means 12 o'clock. So don't be late. So, but if you are, and I'm your supervisor, I'll probably understand a little bit, right? Okay. Okay, here's kind of summarizing. Hispanics tend to make significant life decisions in the context of an existing relationship built on trust. As we think about the workplace, it is about relationships, right? And those of us that are leaders, we have to work hard to earn your trust. And that means that when I say I'm going to do something, I have to do it. And I have to do it enough times for you to think, maybe I can trust him. Because all these 20 times he's said it and then he did it. It takes time to build trust, right? So if you want to have a good working relationship with your Hispanic coworkers, then you have to invest in the relationship and you have to establish trust, which takes time. And so relationships take time to build, but they become the foundational and natural network to reach Hispanics and to engage with their worldview. So anyway, so here's some good tools that you might want to consider. The one Sherwood Longenfelter and Marvin K. Mayers, that's the one that has the concept of time. But they look at like, I don't know, 10 or 11 values. And then you can actually take a little quiz in that book, which I highly recommend. This is a little green book, 140 pages, $15. You're going to get way more value than $15. But there's a little test you can take, and then based on the score, you plot yourself on a grid. And then wherever you plot yourself tells you, you know what? You're actually more Asian than you are North American on this value. Or on this value, you might be more Hispanic. On this value, you might be more North American. So it plots you plot yourself on each value so that you know how far away you are from the other people you work with, right? So it's an effective tool. I really highly recommend you take it's a little survey thing. And you can, and then of course, they have North American culture, Hispanic culture, and Yapese culture. And guess whose culture they plot on top of that? The culture of Jesus. Pretty interesting. Was he ever late? I don't think so. Not if he knew everything about time and omnipresent and omniscient. Like when he got to Lazarus' funeral, was he late? Well, according to the sisters, he was late, but not according to his time, because he said, hey, Lazarus, get up, come on out. Was he late when Jairus's daughter was asleep? And he said, no, she's not dead, she's asleep. And he told the little girl, wake up. And they said, give her some tamales and some, some fajitas. Look, she looks hungry, And so Jesus had this perfect balance of task and time of, and so it's really good. That's fascinating. Now, how many of y'all are still breathing? If you raise your hand. Okay. If you're still breathing, you're going to have conflict. It's natural, right? With people you live with a coworker, you have a calendar date for conflict. Jen, we're going to have conflict. I don't know when, I don't know for what reason, but it's coming, right? Because we're people. And so it's not that you're going to have conflict, it's how do you resolve it? That's what counts. And how do you resolve it when there's two cultures at play with different values and different worldviews and different presuppositions going at the same time? How do you resolve that conflict? Okay, so Elmer takes you through the different ways to resolve conflict in non-Western ways. So it's very, very helpful. And then Ortiz has the Hispanic challenges just about the demographics and so on. There's other stuff too, but these are classics. If you can't get all of them, just get the first two. If you can't get the first two, number one for sure, get that one, take the quiz. At least it builds awareness of, you think, man, I am so North American. I can't even see how North American I am. I don't even understand the Hispanic people. So if you might learn that, or you might be Hispanic and say, man, I'm really Latino here and I need to, but I'm not in Mexico. So I need to kind of learn the, Euro-American way, because that's the way society functions. So it's good for both to kind of know to go. So to go toward each other. This one right here, and Sean, I'm going to end it right here. So so that a lot of preachers say, and now in closing. So, and they go for 20 more minutes, but I'm going to stop here with this one last thing, promise. And if I don't, stand up so you can remind me, okay? All right, so the goal of this one here, Sherwood Longenfelter, is he has this concept, and I'll close with this in closing. And no one said amen. It's like you didn't agree with me there, so amen. So all right. So because the only thing between us and the food is this thing I'm going to say here. So it's the 150% person. That's the goal. The 100 to become 150% person. Everybody got that? Everybody say 150%. Ready? 150%. Okay, why is that? Because there's only one person in human history that was ever a 200% person, and that was Jesus of Nazareth, who was fully God and fully human. 200%, full, both up to 100. The best we can do is get to 150. What that means is you're 100% of who you have been up till now, but to become cross-cultural, you have to delete, erase, eliminate, sideline 25% of everything you've ever learned and valued and cared about. That it's not going to help you in a Hispanic context. You have to delete it and come down to 75. Then because Hispanics are growing and there's more and more of them around us, you got to start with a little bit, 10%, and your best is going to work up to 75%, because then you're bicultural. You function in both cultures. You start with 0 and get up to 75 to become real Mexicana or real Mexicano or real Latino, that you know the rules, you know the foods, you know the language. You're pretty much functional, right? But you haven't lost who you were before. You've got 75 of that, but you had to reduce a little bit. So same thing with Hispanic. You have to take some of the Hispanic traits and values and maybe sideline some of those that aren't helping you in an Anglo predominant culture and work setting. They're not helping you. You got to sideline that. Get it down to 75, then start with 0 of Anglo culture and learn the ways, learn what things mean, learn the unsaid things, and learn the rules, because they're there, right? And you become a bicultural person. So you can go into an all Hispanic setting and flip the switch, you're there. You can go into predominant Anglo setting, flip the switch, you're there. You know how to function, and you're bicultural, right? And it covers the whole Western Hemisphere, pretty much, half the world, right?